It's called reality TV, but the truth is that a lot of what you see is carefully calculated by producers. Look no further than these shows for proof.
Ink Master premiered in 2012 at the height of the shows about tattoos craze. The premise of the show is pretty simple. A bunch of tattoo artists compete to see who's the best overall artist. While the popular show has made it through plenty of seasons and 2 spin-offs, it may not be exactly what it seems. For an elimination challenge, artists may be given 6 hours to do their work. According to Redditor Corey Matcham, a tattooed participant on the show, the time limit is actually pretty meaningless. On the show, Judge Dave Navarro appears to give warnings of how much time is left, but Corey said that's all done in editing to present a false sense of urgency.
That's it. Time is up. Sharpie's down.
In his experience, some artists were finished hours in advance, while other artists even went overtime. Redditor Tattooed Mom similarly claimed in an AMA that on her season, Dave Navarro's timed warnings were all filmed at one time and edited into the show after the fact. A big part of the elimination process is choosing a handful of the worst tattoos that have to go head-to-head before the judges. In many seasons, this is in part accomplished with the help of the Human Canvas jury, which is made up of the newly tattooed participants.
You're here because the Human Canvas jury determined that you had the worst tattoo of the day.
Corey Matcham was on a jury twice, and he explained in his Reddit AMA it was all fake. He says they did discuss as a group what they all thought of the tattoos, but producers only included the things they had told the jury to say. Corey claims his jury actually picked an entirely different tattoo than the one that made it to air, but the show was edited to make it look otherwise. The show does a good job of showing how the judges regularly go from studio to studio checking out all the progress. But according to Corey Matcham, that's totally staged too. He claims the judges are actually barely on set at all, and that they came in for about 5 minutes to do the walkthrough on camera. In the end, this gets edited to look like the 3 judges were in the room the whole time. Redditor Jay Dizzle, a Human Canvas on a different season, adds that some of the judges seem to make things up on the fly, not really sticking to any standards or guidelines when it comes to judging. For a show that's supposed to be focused on tattoo artistry, there's a lot of time spent on weird flash challenges that don't reflect realistic tattoo scenarios. The flash challenge can be anything from ice sculpting to burning objects with live electrical wires. Season 3 artist Frank McManus was required to tattoo an inmate in a prison cell with 1 needle and extremely poor lighting. With limited resources and equipment, he felt there was no way he could produce work to the best of his ability, nor could anyone else. As he told Penn Live, the challenges don't have much to do with what tattooing really is. To make things worse, some challenges are physically daunting. Season 1 artist Heather Sin told LA Weekly that between tattooing pig corpses in a freezing meat locker and getting sunburned while working on a car, the show was more like Fear Factor than anything else. She acknowledges that she was probably too sensitive for the show, but also should have known it was never really going to be about art. One of the biggest charges against any reality show is that it's all plotted out ahead of time, and based on what past contestants have said, Ink Master is exactly that. During an NBC interview, artist Kyle Dunbar said that one of the hardest things for him to deal with on the show was watching the judges play favorites, praising a tattoo with noticeable flaws from an artist they liked, while simultaneously critiquing the same flaws from a different artist. Corey Matcham noted that many shots are just flat-out staged, and contestants are instructed beforehand how they need to act and react. For example, Human Canvases are given headphones, but the producers actually just stick them on long enough to get a shot on camera, because the headphones are made by a sponsor. Apparently, the team behind Ink Master also tried to make the show seem a little saltier than it actually was. Heather Sin told LA Weekly that a producer told the contestants that if they wanted to go to sleep, they better start talking about each other on camera because nothing they were actually talking about was going to make it to air.
The Storage Wars myth of finding the coolest and most valuable treasures simply by opening the right locker is about as realistic as the Goonies. Dave Hester, one of the stars of A&E's Storage Wars, not only told the world the show was fake, he laid it all down in a lawsuit he filed against the network in late 2012. According to ABC, Hester filed the lawsuit because he said A&E fired him for complaining about all the fakery. Hester alleged wrongful termination, unfair business practices, and breach of contract and made it very clear in his suit that the show is staged. The defendants would like the public to believe that the series presents a genuine and accurate portrayal of the abandoned storage locker auction process.
The truth, however, is that nearly every aspect of the series is faked.
There's always been speculation that Storage Wars and other reality TV programs are fake, but when a reality star actually comes forward and says so on an actual legal document, it can get kind of hard to keep suspending that disbelief. Hester's lawsuit referred to a contest and contestants and seemed to allege that Storage Wars is a game show that's been rigged. A&E, on the other hand, said the show is protected by the First Amendment, which basically gives producers the right to run it however they like.
If the games are rigged, no!
The games are rigged?
Yes!
It's kind of a strange argument that essentially lies are protected by the First Amendment. A&E seems to basically be admitting that it's all just a ruse. But it does make a certain weird kind of sense if you also consider that scripted dramas don't have an obligation to tell the truth. Really, the only thing that separates reality television from scripted television is perception. You might suppose that reality TV is supposed to be real, but there aren't any laws that say it has to be. Hester did not initially emerge triumphant in the suit, but it wasn't because the judge decided the show was on the up and up. The judge actually decided that all the fakery was fine because it was, quote, expressive free speech. According to Screener, the judge ultimately decided that Hester wasn't specific enough with his accusations of wrongful termination and threw out the case. But he also said Hester could refile with a more specific accusation. That's what Hester did, and in July 2014, the case was finally settled for an undisclosed amount. The settlement really only addressed the accusations of wrongful termination, not the fakery accusations, so reality TV can just go on doing what it's always done. Because if fake reality television is simply expressive free speech, then there really isn't any expectation of honesty between reality TV producers and their audiences, at least legally. Here's the punchline. According to International Business Times, after the lawsuit was over, A&E welcomed Hester back to the show. Hester was a popular character, and before his return, the show's ratings were on the decline. Plus, on-screen conflict is great for reality television, and you can't really sue your employer and come back to the office without some residual tension lingering around.
This is America. I can say whatever I want.
Beyond that, there are some more sinister reasons why keeping Hester close is probably a good thing for the network. We've already seen what happens when he's not working for A&E. Under contract, he's probably more likely to refrain from ratting out all the fakery at his first opportunity. What better way to make sure a former employee stays loyal than to make him an employee again? The show's producers are used to the accusations. The summer before Hester filed his lawsuit, executive producer Tom Beers defended the show during a panel discussion sponsored by the National Geographic Channel. When one of the panelists said something about the rumors that the containers on Storage Wars were, quotes, salted, Beers said, "Nope, I can honestly tell you that the stuff found in those containers are found in storage containers." His statement left a lot of wiggle room. If the stuff was bought at antique stores, then transported to storage containers, then technically that statement would still be accurate. Beers also went on to say that they might have 20 or 30 auctions and occasionally just combine their finds into one locker so they don't have to film all the lockers individually. That's not exactly salting, but it isn't reality either. In that same National Geographic panel, Beers also admitted to scripting interviews with cast members. It was excused as a substitute for narration, because no one likes to listen to those deadpan off-camera narrators. Beers said, "I have to admit there's some writing involved. We do it in Storage Wars, we do it in America's Lost Treasures. I'm so tired of narration driving story. Stars are given about half their lines, according to Beers, so they can tell their own stories." That seems like a minor offense compared to some of the other things Storage Wars has been accused of. And anyway, it's not like anyone was actually fooled by the stellar acting chops of the Storage Wars stars.
You gonna be able to rummage through stuff and dresses like that?
Yeah, we can rummage through anything with anything on.
Really?
On the other hand, is it reality if it's scripted? And more importantly, is reality more important than the quality of the entertainment? According to Business Insider, Hester lobbed a whole lot of accusations at the show, and one of those was that instead of just letting the drama unfold, the network would sometimes pay for the lockers bid on by less experienced members of the cast, so the playing field would be even. So while the bigger, more established storage locker moguls were using their own money to invest in lockers, the smaller businesses were depending on A&E to keep them in the game. Admittedly, it wouldn't be much of a war if one of the armies had an overwhelming advantage. Plus, if you're going to let your weaker cast members go bankrupt on bad purchases or get constantly outbid because they lack capital, you're going to have an unsustainably high turnover in your cast. So, from a pragmatic standpoint, this is probably one of A&E's lesser accused crimes. According to Business Insider, Hester's lawsuit also weirdly called out another particular act of fakery, claiming nearly every aspect of the series is faked. even down to the plastic surgery that one of the female cast members underwent in order to create more sex appeal for the show. That particular accusation led fans to speculate about who went under the knife. It does seem like kind of a low blow on Hester's part. The show might be fake, and one of the women on it might have had plastic surgery, but it seems like there's plenty of ammunition against a network without having to drag other cast members into it.
Before the stars of Storage Wars can find treasure among the cardboard and Rubbermaid, there first must be an auction.
Hester's complaint claimed A&E would often fake the auctions themselves. The suit stated, while on location filming an auction, defendants also film footage of the cast members and the public bidding when no actual auction is taking place, in order to make it appear that any of the cast members is bidding at any given auction, whether or not he or she is actually bidding on the units. There's some other, lesser fakery related to the auctions. For example, the cameras follow cast members as they leave before the end of the auction, presumably to inspect the contents of the locker they just bought, but the winning bidder usually isn't allowed to see the inside of the locker until the day after the auction. According to Radar Online, the accusations of salting aren't unfounded. There's a paper trail that shows stuff was planted inside storage lockers. A source with behind-the-scenes knowledge reportedly approached the outlet claiming there are invoices, checks, and other documentation where the production company actually compensated cast members for supplying items that were planted in the lockers and then discovered on camera. The source explained that cast members would charge A&E a rental fee if they would put their own valuable stuff in the storage lockers to later be found. Because this was essentially a business transaction, there are receipts and invoices and checks that provide evidence of fakery. Another anonymous source speaking to NPR's On the Media in 2012 said he was acquainted with someone whose job was to purchase the antiques that the producers would then plant in the storage lockers. Sometimes producers would even have things appraised weeks before the cast members actually discovered it on camera. The anonymous reality television employee who spoke to On the Media also had some damning things to say about the appraisers themselves. He said the show would bring items found in lockers to appraisers, which were not always or even often actual appraisers, and knowing that ruins the excitement of the show. So, the auctions aren't always auctions, the items found in the storage lockers aren't always found in the storage lockers, and the appraisers who decide the value of the items aren't actually appraisers, and therefore probably don't know what they're talking about. Also, the stars say lines fed to them by the producers, and the whole thing is tainted by network cash. Anyone who has ever owned a storage unit can tell you what a normal storage unit actually looks like. It's full of spiders, everything is covered in dust, the boxes have all been haphazardly piled because it's really just junk that you don't want to deal with right now, and the monthly storage fee seems worth it compared to losing a weekend decluttering when you could be half asleep on your couch watching Storage Wars. If you pay attention to the show, you know that neatly arranged storage units tend to have elevated chances of containing valuable items. And if it's true that the storage units are salted, it seems logical that they're also staged to fit the narrative. Antiques Roadshow has actual antiques and collectibles cred, and guess what? They totally think Storage Wars is fake. Antiques Roadshow executive producer Marcia Bemko said in an interview, quote, "It's an entertainment show." She added that she thinks shows in the genre help generate interest in antiques, which is ultimately good for her show too. She also pointed out that the appraisers on Antiques Roadshow are more likely to provide a fair assessment of the items that are featured on the show since they don't have a financial stake in the buying or selling of those items. One of the show's appraisers added, "I think it's also important to remember that those shows are totally staged. Is it really reasonable to think that someone on Storage Locker Wars is going to find a $100,000 item that somebody left in a storage locker? The show isn't called Storage Locker Wars, but point taken."
Naked and Afraid is known as one of Discovery Channel's most brutal reality shows, but you might not be surprised to learn that the reality show can be more fiction than fact. Naked and Afraid contestant Blair Braverman wrote an extensive, in-depth story about her time on the show for Outside, which included some behind-the-scenes secrets. While both she and her husband were contestants, he was sent to Honduras and she endured the hostile heat of South Africa. She claimed to know beforehand where she was going and was able to study up on the dangerous animals and poisonous plants local to the region. But when it came time to film her first foray into the wilderness, as well as meeting her partner for the next 3 weeks, Braverman said neither happened precisely as they were depicted on the show. Her directions came from a member of the production team named Rachel, and Braverman claimed that what was expected of her was made very clear, stating, "I had to follow the script. 2 people remove their clothes, walk to a landmark, meet each other, and offer whatever joke or earnest greeting they've rehearsed. They find burlap bags, which disguise their microphone transmitters, and a map." Braverman also claimed that she was required to strip down twice to make sure the cameras got all the angles they needed. In an interview with the Fayetteville Observer, Naked and Afraid contestant Hakeem Isler shared his interesting take on the show. He said that it wasn't as off the wall and unnecessary as it might seem, citing friends and family who had gone through natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina and Sandy as real-world examples when survival skills actually come in handy. His partner, Phaedra Brothers, also spoke about working with him. She told Channel Guide that when it came time for her to choose her survival tool, she opted for a fire starter while hoping her partner would select a blade. Isler did, and it was one that he had made himself. With Brothers recollecting to Channel Guide, the fact that my partner had invented the knife himself was impressive because he had taken the time to research what was needed to survive. So when I first saw the tool, I was very excited about it. Though Brothers thought Isler's knife was brilliant, she claimed that cameras didn't show it breaking just 4 days into their 21-day ordeal. But after it was modified, Brothers said that it worked much better moving forward. One question that might be at the forefront of many viewers' minds is just how do women contestants deal with their periods during the 21 days they're out in the wild? When people spoke with former contestants Stacey Lee Osario and Alyssa Ballesteros, Osario claimed, "The show does allow us to have tampons. It's not only a sanitary hazard, but it's a safety hazard because you don't want to attract predators."
I read somewhere that their periods attract bears. The bears can smell the menstruation.
Ballesteros went on to say that the issue of periods wasn't a large concern, and that cycles were often disrupted when contestants were dumped out in the middle of the wilderness. USC Fertility claims that there are a number of reasons that a regular monthly period might be skipped. Chief among those reasons include extreme exercise, situations that result in the release of stress hormones, and starvation-level diets, which can all just put a temporary stop to periods. When Phaedra Brothers sat down to speak with Channel Guide about her experience on Naked and Afraid, she came with allegations against the series. The episode featuring her and her partner Hakeem Isler saw her getting incredibly sick, which the series attributed to Brothers drinking bad water. But Brothers claims that what was shown wasn't even close to what actually happened. According to her, the luggage she'd filled with food for the trip to the Himalayan mountains was lost, and one of the crew members made her a meal of chicken curry. Within hours, she informed the crew that she was suffering from food poisoning, vomiting, diarrhea, and dehydration. However, she was told to carry on with the schedule as planned. Brothers said that it wasn't a matter of poor editing or a misunderstanding, but blatant misrepresentation. She also claimed that when she protested, Discovery made it clear that they were sticking to their version of events, saying in her interview, "They said that if I said anything other than the storyline they picked, they would delete my comments. They decide the storyline, but in that particular incident, I think they thought it would be a better, more dramatic story, but it wasn't the truth." When two of the producers of Naked and Afraid spoke with Reality Blurred, they stressed the effort that's made in telling a truthful story, but they also confirmed that there are times when the crew steps in and influences events. Some of it can be completely understandable. Executive producer Steve Rankin confirmed that contestants have emergency radio equipment, walkie-talkies, and whistles. While Rankin says that one of their most important rules is to interfere as little as possible, there are times when they have to get involved, and not just when there's a medical emergency.
We have a fire starter. We carry it in our field kit all the time. You can have this, you can have fire in 10 minutes.
When the time comes for contestants to head to the extraction point, Rankin claims if contestants go off track during that walk, they might just have a little nudge from the producers. Supervising producer Matilda Bittner claims that that doesn't happen often, but when it does, she'll sometimes step in for a pep talk, saying to Reality Blurred, "If you lose your mental strength or your motivation, it's over. When they're having these lows, when they're like, I don't want to do this anymore, remind them why they're there, what they signed up for, and that they have it in them." In an extensive blog post, Naked and Afraid contestant Honora Bowen detailed her time on the show, claiming that she was told to start the anti-malaria medication Malarone before getting on a plane to Brazil. She detailed her severe side effects, which included increased sensitivity to light, mood swings, nightmares, nausea, and dizziness. She went on to say that her partner Matt wasn't taking Malarone, so he wasn't dealing with similar debilitating side effects. Bowen claimed that he was allowed to keep taking his prescription for Adderall, but that wasn't the case for her. Bowen went as far as to take a polygraph test, during which she said she was forbidden from taking her prescription kidney medication. Bowen added that she was told she could stop taking Malarone as long as she was recorded saying that she was stopping the medication of her own free will. She allegedly declined, writing on her blog, "I do see an obvious gross oversight that my partner was never told to take Malarone while I was." Bowen claims that the side effects she suffered led to some of the conflicts between her and her partner. According to what Honora Bowen has written on her blog, Naked and Afraid was more scripted than audiences might think. She wrote that she had shown up with several knives and a water filter, but the production team got the final say over what she was going to bring. When Bowen was asked if she would be open to taking something that would serve as a fire starter, she wrote, "I agreed and said that my father had recommended a magnifying glass. The producers loved this concept, so they sent a production assistant to town to find a magnifying glass." But Bowen claimed that she was regularly instructed to refer to it as her late father's magnifying glass, instead of one someone had bought at a store.
I'm gonna get this back to her, so I just want to grab it so she has something that she has a sentimental attachment to.
It was an incredibly hard lie to tell, with Bowen writing, "I was appeasing the producers by showing them what a good actor I was. This was a very emotionally unnerving act that actually affected me very deeply, as my father's death was so recent and I was still deeply mourning." Location is everything, but are Naked and Afraid contestants really in remote locations hundreds of miles from civilization? Not according to Honora Bowen, who claimed that they were actually so close to civilization that she was kept awake every night by the sound of a DJ holding a nearby block party. But this hasn't always been the case. In an area of Alabama that was used for a 2016 episode of Naked and Afraid, a woman named Lisa Theris became lost for nearly a month in 2017. Alabama.com spoke to Naked and Afraid producer Jim Morton, whose family owned the land where the episode was recorded. The area in which Theris disappeared was about 10 miles from Morton's land, and he doubted that she couldn't have found her way back, claiming, "Even out there in the middle of stuff, you can hear power saws, you can hear all kinds of things. You run into fences out there in the middle of the woods, and I mean, Alabama power is all over the place." When speaking to the show's contestants, Morton added, "They don't want to wander off, but if they wanted to, they wouldn't have to go far to find something that would lead them out." When Kim Shelton found herself in Costa Rica, there was no way she could have predicted she would get incredibly sick from eating a turtle. According to what she and her partner Shane Lewis told the Daily Mail, their issue wasn't so much with the food poisoning, but how their various medical emergencies were portrayed on the show. When Shelton was given actual food and IV drips, these weren't shown on the show. All that was featured was that she was sick and seemingly recovered. At the same time, the series depicted Lewis as exhausted and struggling, though no real reason was given.
Are you injured?
Not injured. I'm just hurt.
Lewis later revealed that he had been upset by how he was portrayed. Even when he broke 3 toes on the 4th day of the challenge, it wasn't even mentioned. He told the Daily Mail, "When I agreed to do the show, I said to the producers that if you're going to do a real raw show, I will do it. They said they wanted to show the reality and how difficult it was, but they gave it the Hollywood treatment." While it might seem like the naked half of Naked and Afraid would be the most intimidating part, the prospect of going 21 days only eating what you and your partner can forage, catch, and kill can be terrifying. Still, some contestants have alleged it wasn't exactly as desperate as it appeared. Honora Bowen claimed that producers told her where to find coconuts in a nearby lagoon, which became an invaluable food source. She later wrote on her blog, "I had to wonder how the producers knew, but it became obvious to me later as I repeatedly saw members of the crew with wet shorts." In an interview with Empty Lighthouse magazine, Bowen said that at one point she left camp and made her way to a medic's tent. There, she found some supplies, including emergency electrolytes, and hid them from producers back at her camp. She justified this as still being in the spirit of the show, saying, "It is still survival, you know. What are the rules of it?" When speaking with Reality Blurred, Steve Rankin and Matilda Bittner claimed that one of the most important things they needed to do as producers was to give the occasional pep talk. Rankin explained in his interview, "When they've had enough and they can't do it anymore and you see them break, it's tragic, it's heartbreaking. Every single one of them regrets it." But when Honora Bowen considered tapping out, she claims, "My episode's producer informed me that if I consciously tapped out, the story would be completely altered and would be, and I quote, that toad's story. He warned me about this." Bowen wrote on her blog that as the days went on and she started to lose control over her bodily functions, she knew something was gravely wrong.
No matter how much water we drink, we're going to maintain constant levels of dehydration.
So she faked falling unconscious, explaining, "I pretended to be basically catatonic. I let my body go limp because honestly, it was pretty close to that point anyways. I was pretty close to going into a coma for real." Bowen claims that when the medics were summoned and she was carried out on a stretcher, she was conscious the entire time but played unconscious for the camera. Ultimately, Bowen had lost around 18 pounds in 16 days and suffered long-term consequences from her time on the show.
Deadliest Catch is an honest look into one of the world's most dangerous professions, but how real is it, really? Turns out there may be quite a bit of TV magic at work. Questions about the authenticity of Deadliest Catch have been circulating for a long time. In fact, a close look at the Season 4 premiere revealed that some events had been deliberately remixed to create a nail-biting incident that actually never happened.
That's not good.
The opener showed the Wizard struggling in a massive storm. Huge waves coupled with a leak below decks suggested that the ship was in immediate danger of sinking. But the massive waves were filmed in October, a month after the Wizard's crew scrambled to fix the leak. It was such a big deal that Discovery's president, John Ford, made an official statement about the scene, explaining, "The Wizard was struck by a big wave, and that wave caused the leak you see in the show. The thing we didn't have on camera was the actual wave that struck the Wizard. That was shot at a separate time on the same journey. We did that for the story continuity." Ford went on to explain that the Deadliest Catch production team routinely does pickup shots to help with the storytelling, saying, "Nothing is made up, and nothing needs to be made up." So, what exactly are pickup shots? They're usually reshoots done after the main filming and can be necessary for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they're used to fill in gaps in the story, and sometimes they're needed for technical reasons. For example, if a shot is out of focus, it might be reshot. And sometimes footage gets lost or corrupted. This means that audiences aren't necessarily seeing exactly what happened, but according to Discovery, that doesn't mean they're lying about anything. And pickup shots can be a big deal. In 2010, Discovery settled a lawsuit with the Hillstrand brothers. The network claimed they'd violated their contract by refusing to participate in a planned 2-hour special and failing to return to film a series of pickups. How often these filler shots are used remains unclear. In 2022, the Seattle Times spoke with Captain Jack Bunnell about the truth of what makes it on the screen. He had some pretty serious accusations to make, including that there are some deadliest catch captains who deliberately do things to make life on a crab boat more interesting for the cameras. Bunnell claimed longtime captain Jake Anderson would deliberately guide his boat into waves to make the biggest impact. This was dangerous, and Bunnell actually got hurt on board Anderson's ship. Bunnell also claimed that Anderson pushed the crew beyond their limits and ordered them to set up crab pots on the deck in a way that's not necessarily the safest. Bunnell said, "You got to make it exciting somehow. What we do, hauling pots 24 hours a day, is boring." Anderson denied doing any such thing, and it's important to stress just how serious accusations that a captain would deliberately put their crew at risk are. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, not only is the fishing industry inherently dangerous, but Alaskan crab fishing has among the highest instances of injuries and fatalities.
I lost a trusted friend and an outstanding employee and a brother in life.
Weather, darkness, brutal winds, and unpredictable seas all make for potentially deadly conditions, and suggesting that a captain makes them more dangerous by showing off for the cameras is a grave accusation. Weather is unpredictable in the most temperate of places, but in the Bering Sea, things can get dicey at the drop of a hat. And while weather forecasters do their best, they're not perfect. For Deadliest Catch, capturing the weather that boats, captains, and crews are dealing with is tough. When Andy Hillstrand sat down to talk to Dockwalk, they asked him if the cameras were able to really convey the feeling of bad weather. Hillstrand replied, "A little bit. It's always worse than whatever they can capture, but they get close though."
On a day like today, every third wave might be that wave. And we don't want to see that wave.
There's a flip side to that, and it was highlighted in a 2022 post that made the rounds on Facebook. The photo showed Deadliest Catch mainstay Sig Hansen walking out of Dutch Harbor Airport with clear blue skies overhead, while crews stand by with a fire hose to make it look like he's walking out into a torrential downpour. The photo didn't just make the rounds on social media, it circulated among other crab boat captains and crews. While some pointed to the photo as evidence that they were better off not being on the show and being asked to perform for the cameras, Discovery issued a statement saying that the moment was an exception, not the norm. The fishing boats of Deadliest Catch aren't shown sitting next to each other, so it's easy to assume they're all around the same size. They're not, and that means that there are some big things that get left out of the show. For starters, let's take the Wizard, which is one of the larger boats at about 151 feet long. Now, compare that to the Lisa Marie.
The 78-foot Lisa Marie is the smallest boat in the crab fleet, barely enough space for the 5-man crew to maneuver around the pots.
Others hover in between, like the Time Bandit, which is 98 feet long. Size impacts quotas. In a nutshell, the bigger the boat, the bigger the quota. But apparently, the smaller boats were finding it more economical to sell their quotas to the bigger ones, and that was a big deal for one simple reason. The bigger the boat, the safer the crew. So why are there still crews out in the smaller boats? Watch the show, and it seems as though captains have no choice but to head out, but in reality, they could just sell their quota. The Seattle Times suggests they opt to fish because it's more lucrative to take the risks that go along with appearing on the show instead of taking the payout and letting bigger, safer boats do the heavy lifting. Just how much they pay is kept tightly under wraps. Elliott Neese was on Deadliest Catch from 2011 to 2015, and while he left the show in order to focus on his addiction issues, he was still officially the owner of the saga into at least 2019. Neese was vague about his future with the show at the time he left, but said that even if he wasn't heavily featured, the saga would be. Although he has also hinted at the fact that there was possibly more going on behind the scenes than what was shown on camera.
I can't on TV. I ain't gonna lie.
Neese told Newswire, "I have my boat out and a crew will be on it. I won't be on it and neither will my dad. He basically was on there to hang out with me. A TV captain will be on the show, Jake Anderson. The real captain won't be seen on the show. Real captain? Discovery still lists Jake Anderson as the captain of the saga as of 2023. He did, however, make additional comments about how events on Deadliest Catch might not line up with reality, saying that his personality didn't play for the camera the way some might hope. In a 2014 interview with Boating magazine, he said, "I don't appease the camera, and maybe that doesn't always come off right. But remember, reality TV isn't real. It's entertainment. That's it." Reality television generally falls into the unscripted category, but according to a few captains featured on Deadliest Catch, it may not be as entirely unscripted and unplanned as it seems. Details are understandably scarce, but in 2023, boat captain Linda Greenlaw suggested that Deadliest Catch was different from her previous television experience in a big way. She told Spectrum News, "Filming of Deadliest Catch was more scripted than Swords' Life on the Line. Hey, 19 seasons in, the show has to be more than catching crabs or not. The popularity of the show speaks for itself." Northwestern captain Sig Hansen has also hinted that filming follows a behind-the-scenes outline. In a conversation with New Zealand's The Fishing website, Hansen was asked if the Bering Sea weather was always as bad as it looked, or if it was edited to look that way. He replied, "Everything that they film is accurate, but you will see a lot more of the foul weather as opposed to the calm days. I suppose that's what sells, but the bad weather is a reality." In 2020, the Deadliest Catch editors sat down with the Art of the Cut podcast to provide an in-depth look at what went on when filming wrapped and footage was sent to the post-production team. The finished product might look like it was pretty straightforward, but that's far from the truth, especially when it comes to sound. Video is only part of the show. Just try watching without the sound on and you'll see how important it is. But a lot of what makes it into the final show isn't real. Editor Joe Mikan explained, "A lot of times the recorded sound is unusable due to conditions or mics fail because it gets so cold and icy out there. And in that case, we will use sound effects." He said that using sounds other than what was actually recorded on the boat actually creates a more accurate experience. Editor Rob Butler agreed that their library of sound effects was a powerful tool, saying, "The atmosphere is one of the major draws to this show. It's all the creaks, it's the moans of the boat, the metal, the machinery, the waves." Deadliest Catch shows captains keeping track of counts and deckhands sorting through the crab that are pulled up from the depths, but what doesn't get mentioned is that some of the captains have gotten tagged with fines and penalties. In 2008, Captain Richard Kwasnick was cited for having a small percentage of undersized crab, and that's not unusual. Elliott Neese was tagged by authorities twice. In 2011, a small percentage of his catch was found to be undersized. And in 2014, he entered a guilty plea to having undersized and/or female crab. Also in 2014, former captain Peter Liskey was sanctioned for undersized crab. In 2016, TMZ published court documents revealing Brenna A captain Sean Dwyer had been fined for crab pots that weren't up to par. While those are pretty straightforward mistakes, other lawsuits have involved Discovery. In 2019, Seattle PI reported that a jury had awarded Time Bandit deckhand David Zielinski $1.35 million following a 2013 incident in which a firework exploded in his hand. The suit claimed that not only had Andy Hillstrand given orders to shoot fireworks at the nearby Cape Caution, but that, quote, "a shockingly large quantity of potentially very dangerous fireworks for use by the crew were loaded on the boat in a massive safety violation." And as for the footage, it was claimed that Discovery filmed the incident, but the footage conveniently disappeared. In 2016, Captain Keith Colburn sat down for a conversation with All Your Screens about climate change and why he was one of the few fishermen to be vocal about it. Colburn confirmed that he had been a part of climate change paddles where no one else in the industry wanted to say it, but he said, "A few years ago, you would see maybe one large storm a year. Now you're seeing 7 or 9 a year. And it's because the water is warmer and it's making the weather more unpredictable."
Mother Nature's impact through warming trends and cooling trends dictates survival rates of juvenile crab, fish, everything.
For a long time, though, Deadliest Catch glossed over the impact of climate change. Finally, in 2017, Forbes described it as a guest star on the show. In a conversation with the Associated Press, executive producer R. Decker Watson Jr. shared why it had taken so long, saying, "It's a big risk for us to discuss climate change because so many people can think it's a political issue, when really it isn't. particularly in the context of the fishing fleet. Meanwhile, research from the Journal of Biogeography confirmed that king crab are leaving long familiar fishing grounds for cooler water, forcing fishing boats to follow them. Still, Watson suggested they weren't going to get into the why of the change, admitting, "At the end of the day, the job of Deadliest Catch isn't to teach people, it's to keep people at the edge of their seats."
You'd be hard-pressed to find the reality in most modern reality television shows, but one of the worst offenders may be the Discovery Channel hit Moonshiners, partly because its goings-ons are less dirty money and more squeaky clean. Making moonshine remains illegal in the United States, so how can the stars of Moonshiners break the law on national TV and stay out of jail? Well, according to local law enforcement, it's because Moonshiners is about as real as Teen Wolf. An exasperated alcoholic beverage control spokeswoman informed the Associated Press that the show only features dramatizations of moonshining, adding, "If illegal activity was actually taking place, the Virginia ABC Bureau of Law Enforcement would have taken action. Doubtless, the Bureau will eventually take another look at the show just as soon as they stop those pesky Duke boys from terrorizing Hazard County."
Fighting the system like a true modern-day Robin Hood.
Moonshiners is produced by reality TV behemoth Magilla Entertainment, which also makes shows like America's Worst Tattoos, Submissive Wives' Guide to Marriage, and Militia Rising. Their finest work is unquestionably King of Thrones, a show that can only be described as Pimp My Ride for toilets.
You've got rear bidet, front bidet, butt dryer. You also have full music on here. Deodorized feature.
Unfortunately, Magilla's shows have been repeatedly accused of misleading viewers. For example, an episode of Lakefront Bargain Hunt depicts an interior decorator named Robin Corbet choosing between 3 different houses. In reality, Corbet bought the winning home almost 2 years before the show taped. The show Southie Rules was widely panned for being obviously scripted, while the less said about Long Island Medium, the better.
Wow, you can see into the present.
In other words, Magilla may not be the gold standard for keeping the reality in reality TV, or even the cubic zirconium standard.
It's a made-up tale.
The first season of Moonshiners featured Special Agent Jesse Tate of the Virginia Alcohol Beverage Control Bureau, although attentive viewers noted that he never interacted with the Moonshiners or gave any indication he was aware of that aspect of the show. Sure enough, the furious Bureau later claimed the producers had lied about the kind of program they were making. In a statement, the Bureau insisted Virginia ABC agreed to participate in an informative piece that documents the history of moonshine and moonshine investigations in Virginia. Virginia ABC did not participate nor was aware of the false depiction of moonshine manufacturing, distribution, and/or transportation in the filming, and would not have participated in the documentary had it known of this portrayal. Jesse Tate, for obvious reasons, did not reappear in Season 2.
I don't think your manager would appreciate it.
I don't appreciate your ruse, ma'am.
I beg your pardon?
Your ruse, your cunning attempt to trick me.
When it comes to depicting real crimes, reality show producers have to walk a fine line. Under U.S. law, witnesses to a crime aren't actually obligated to stop it from happening.
Are you sure it's legal? Of course it's legal.
For example, on A&E's reality show Intervention, a camera crew followed a visibly intoxicated woman as she climbed into her car and tried to drive away. Even if she had hit someone, A&E wouldn't have been responsible, since its crew were merely observers and did not prompt the woman to drive drunk.
Well. If it isn't the big-time, hotshot lawyer man.
However, if a show deliberately puts people at risk, then it could be liable to legal action. One man settled out of court after he was hit in the face with a shoe during a fight on The Real Housewives of New Jersey. His lawyer claimed that the fight was staged and that the producers should have taken precautions to ensure bystanders weren't maimed by flying stilettos. Big Brother also had to settle a lawsuit after accepting a housemate with a history of assault, who proceeded to threaten another contestant at knife point. Because the stars of Moonshiners are paid to appear on the show, the producers would almost certainly be liable if anyone was injured from drinking illegal alcohol produced for the show. Since sheer insurance costs haven't shut down production, it seems likely that no actual moonshine is being sold on the Discovery Channel's dime. Although it's illegal to distill spirits in the US without state and federal permits, it's not like those permits are impossible to get. With the publicity from the show, it would be super easy for the show's stars to secure backing and go legit. This is exactly what cast member Tim Smith did, partnering with the Prost Beverage Company to market Climax brand moonshine in stores nationwide.
You can have the pretty bottle, and you can have my pretty face on it, but it's all about what's inside.
In other words, even if the show does feature real moonshining, it's not because the cast members are desperate criminals with no other options. They're just deliberately choosing not to get the correct permits for the sake of the show. Hopefully, more reality shows embrace this model, since Extreme Makeover Home Edition would definitely be more interesting if all the work was done at night with no planning permission.
Yeah, I've made all kinds of liquor in my time. I've made the fighting kind, the loving kind, the crying kind.
The show does feature unquestionably real footage of moonshine being produced by legendary bootlegger Popcorn Sutton. However, this footage wasn't filmed for the show. In fact, Sutton sadly took his own life in 2009, 2 years before Moonshiners first aired. Before he died, he was the subject of the acclaimed documentary, This Is the Last Damn Run of Liquor I'll Ever Make. The producers merely bought the rights to the movie and used the footage in the first season of their show. At the time of his death, Sutton was awaiting trial for, among other crimes, illegally distilling spirits, a charge notably avoided by the stars of the show, who we viewers are expected to believe are doing the exact same thing. When asked how they get away with breaking the law on national TV, the stars of Moonshiners usually have a simple answer. Nobody can prove they're actually doing that. Tim Smith told Bourbon Blog that it's not enough to see someone making something that looks like moonshine. Instead, physical samples of the product you're producing have to be taken and analyzed. Meanwhile, Josh Owens told Motorcycle USA that, "I'm not in jail because it's not evidence, for one, that I'm on TV making moonshine, and for two, I could be doing anything. It could be just water." Either way, Owens argues that the cops, quote, got a lot bigger fish to fry than somebody just making a little bit of something to sip on, which does kind of undercut the show's daring outlaws premise. When Magilla Entertainment started working on the show in 2010, executives thought that focusing on illicit moonshiners would be legally risky, probably because, well, it is. Instead, they planned to feature licensed moonshiners going legit. Unfortunately, that turned out to be incredibly boring. As producer Matt Ostrom told author Jamie Joyce, a legal distillery is not the most compelling thing. It's not like people on boats hunting alligators or fighting giant seas. It's literally water boils. As a result, Magilla went back to the outlaw concept. Although the producers insist that the finished show does depict illegal moonshining, their legal worries presumably didn't just vanish, suggesting that the criminal activity might not be all that it appears. Ultimately, the doubt may be half the fun. Maybe it's real, and probably it's not. Either way, it's definitely entertaining.
How are we gonna explain that to the police? We out here with cotton candy.
You got moonshine and you got cotton candy. Did you go rob the street fair?